Can God's purpose override your preferences? Hear me when I say this. Sometimes love shows up wrapped in what you didn't expect. You prayed for a partner, but God sent someone who didn't fit your age range, your plan, your picture. Yet deep down, something in your spirit says, "This is divine." Remember Ruth and Boaz. She wasn't looking for romance, she was walking in obedience. And in that obedience, God connected her to destiny. Sometimes the age gap, the timing, the difference. It's not a mistake, it's a mark of purpose. God doesn't match comfort, He matches calling. And what I'm about to reveal to you about this could shift your perspective forever. But you must watch this video until the very end. Don't skip. Have you ever noticed that life rarely gives you what you expect, but often exactly what you need? We live in a world obsessed with preference. We build lists, we make plans, we design the perfect version of how love should look, sound, and arrive. Yet, when destiny knocks, it rarely asks permission to look familiar. Sometimes it comes wrapped in a voice that's softer than you imagined, a face older than you pictured, or a hand that carries more years but also more wisdom. And in that moment, the soul is confronted with a question far deeper than attraction. Can I recognize God's purpose even when it doesn't match my preference? We forget that every soul you meet is part of a divine choreography. The universe or God, whichever word makes you breathe easier, does not operate according to human convenience. It moves in rhythm with necessity. It calls forth what will stretch you, not what will soothe you. Think of Moses, he never expected his destiny to be tied to a burning bush. Or David. His anointing came when no one even considered him worthy to be in the lineup. Divine purpose is never wrapped in what's convenient. It's wrapped in what's essential to your growth. So when someone steps into your life with an age difference that makes you hesitate, pause before you dismiss it. What if the difference you see as distance is the very bridge God to balance what you lack? One has lived through storms, the other carries fresh vision. One brings the patience of years, the other brings the fire of youth. And between the two, a sacred exchange begins, a transfer of wisdom, energy, perspective, and love that transcends the illusion of years. The ego is quick to calculate compatibility through the lens of time. How old are they? How old am I? But the spirit asks another question. What are we meant to become together? You see, when the divine aligns two people, it is never just about companionship. It's about transformation. It's about refining the edges of your character through connection. It's about calling out the parts of you that only another soul, different, seasoned, and perhaps older, can reach. There is something profoundly humbling about learning from a love that doesn't fit your mold. It dismantles pride. It breaks the illusion that you are in control of how destiny unfolds. It invites surrender, and surrender, my friends, is where revelation begins. You can't cling to control and expect to touch the eternal. You have to let go, fall backward into the arms of the unknown, and trust that what's holding you was sent by something greater than you. Perhaps the real question isn't whether the person is too old or too young. The question is, can you see God beyond the difference? Can you sense the divine handwriting in the timing, the circumstances, the inexplicable pull that brought you together? Because when love carries divine purpose, it refuses to obey social metric. It doesn't check calendars, it checks callings. It's not about fitting into expectation, it's about fulfilling intention. And this is where most people miss it. They confuse familiarity with rightness. They look for comfort when God is trying to give them growth. They chase similarity when heaven is trying to show them synergy. Sometimes the reason the connection feels unusual is because it's anointed. It's meant to teach you something that only difference can reveal. The greatest love stories in Scripture, and in life, are not the ones that look perfect. They are the ones that reveal purpose. And purpose, when honored, produces peace that transcends logic. So, if your heart has found peace, even amidst questions, whispers, or age differences, perhaps you've stumbled upon something holy. Stop asking, "Why doesn't this look like what I wanted?" And start asking, "What is this trying to make me become?" Because in the end, purpose will always outlast preference. And when you finally surrender to that truth, you'll discover that love was never about who fits your picture, but who fits your purpose. It's fascinating, isn't it? How destiny often hides behind ordinary moments, how something so divine can begin in a field of leftovers. Ruth wasn't chasing love. She was gleaning barley. She wasn't dressing for romance. She was simply surviving, showing loyalty to an older woman who had nothing left to give. Yet in that field, something eternal began to unfold. Because the moment you stop chasing what the world tells you to chase, you create the space for heaven to find you. Ruth's story isn't about luck, it's about alignment. She didn't force anything. She didn't scheme or manipulate outcomes. She simply said, "Where you go, I'll go." That single act of obedience, rooted in faithfulness, not fantasy, positioned her in the right field, at the right time, under the right set of eyes. It's a subtle reminder that divine connections aren't discovered through striving. They're revealed through surrender. When your spirit is anchored in purpose, God doesn't need your help to make introductions. He orchestrates encounters that shift the course of your life. Boaz was not the youthful prince most romantic tales promise. He was older, established, seasoned. Yet that's precisely what made him ready. Ruth's purity of heart met Boaz's maturity of spirit. Her obedience met his stability, and together, something divine took shape. A covenant that would birth a lineage leading to King David, and eventually, to the very lineage of Christ himself. The world might have looked at them and seen an odd match. But heaven saw a divine merge, destiny disguised as difference. That's the beauty of the divine order. It rarely flatters your preference, but always fulfills your purpose. We are so conditioned to measure love by chemistry. But heaven measures it by calling. Ruth didn't find Boaz because he was her type. She found him because she was in position. She was moving with humility, consistency, and grace. And purpose recognized purpose. Sometimes the greatest love stories are less about falling in love and more about walking into obedience. When you begin to move in rhythm with what's right rather than what's easy, you attract people who are moving in that same rhythm. That's how divine partnerships form. Not through force, but through flow. The universe has this mysterious way of guiding two paths together, weaving them with invisible threads until suddenly you realize it wasn't coincidence, it was choreography. Now, imagine for a moment that Ruth had resisted. Imagine if she had said, "I'm too young for him." Or, "This isn't what I pictured." She would have walked away from a destiny she didn't yet understand. Sometimes, your miracle doesn't look like your plan. Sometimes your Boaz doesn't fit your ideal, but fits your assignment. When you cling to obedience rather than opinion, your life becomes a portal for divine surprises. There's a sacred rhythm in Ruth's story. A rhythm of trust. It's the sound of a heart that says, "I don't understand it, but I'll stay faithful." That's the music of destiny. And in that music, age, distance, and difference lose their power. Because the real connection isn't between bodies. It's between purposes. That's what divine love looks like. It's not two people completing each other. It's two people complementing what God already placed within them. It's an exchange of strengths and an intertwining of destinies. Ruth brought devotion, humility, and vision. Boaz brought wisdom, provision, and covering. Together, they became something neither could be alone. Every soul that walks into your life carries a possibility, a seed of transformation, But not every encounter is meant to last, only the ones rooted in obedience will bear eternal fruit. Ruth's yes unlocked generations, your yes, no matter how small, could do the same. That's the mystery of obedience. It doesn't reveal its reward until after the step is taken. So perhaps the person you've met, the one who doesn't quite fit the world's expectations, is not a coincidence at all. Perhaps they are a field of barley waiting to reveal your bow's moment. And just like Ruth, all you need to do is show up where purpose is calling. Even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it challenges your sense of timing, even if it defies logic. Because when obedience meets opportunity, heaven opens. And when heaven opens, even an ordinary field becomes holy ground. What you call unexpected might just be divine alignment in disguise. We live in a culture obsessed with counting years but almost blind to measuring growth. People talk about age as though it's a verdict, a ceiling, a definition of who you are and what you're capable of. Yet time, in its purest sense, is simply movement. It doesn't create wisdom. It only reveals what's been done with it. You can grow old without ever growing up. You can add candles to a cake and still remain untouched by understanding. And you can meet someone with fewer years but far more light. Chronology is easy to measure. You can write it down, celebrate it, compare it. But maturity, real spiritual maturity, is something invisible, something deeper. It is the way a soul responds when tested, the way a person carries themselves in silence, in surrender, in moments when no one applauds. Maturity is not how long you've lived, it's how fully you've awakened. Sometimes, the divine places two people together, separated by years but united by essence. One may have seen more seasons, the other may simply see more clearly. One carries stories of survival, the other carries faith unburdened by cynicism. When such souls meet, something profound occurs. The older learns to feel again, and the younger learns to see beyond the moment. It's not imbalance, it's balance in motion. It's not error, it's harmony dressed in contrast. There is a beauty in difference when the heart is ready to learn. The years between two people do not stand as barriers, they stand as bridges. One builds from wisdom, the other from wonder. And when both are humble enough to listen, love becomes a teacher that transcends arithmetic. That is why so many people miss what's sacred. They're busy checking dates instead of discerning depth. The question is not, how old are you? But what have you done with the time you've been given? Has your heart softened or hardened? Has experience made you bitter or wise? Have you learned to forgive, to let go, to love without needing control? That's where real maturity hides. In the unseen spaces between moments, in the grace with which one handles imperfection. Sometimes, the soul that seems younger carries an ancient wisdom. You can sense it in their silence, their calm, their refusal to chase what doesn't serve them. And sometimes the soul with more years carries the curiosity of a child, open, fearless, unjaded. When these two meet, the universe smiles, because it sees a mirror, a reflection of what wholeness looks like when opposites dance. It's funny how easily we confuse aging with evolving. Time passes whether you grow or not. But evolution requires awareness. It asks that you look at yourself without disguise. It demands that you let go of what no longer serves you, that you become a student again, that you risk being uncomfortable. That is why divine partnerships often bring friction. They are mirrors. They show you where you've stopped learning. They awaken what's asleep within you. To truly love beyond age is to see the soul before the body, to feel the essence before the story, to recognize the eternal hiding beneath the temporary. In that recognition, something magical happens. The idea of older and younger dissolves. What remains is the present moment, vibrating with understanding, humility, and grace. You see, the spirit doesn't measure in years. It measures in awareness, and awareness, once touched, expands everything it encounters. That's why sometimes your heart feels at home with someone whose timeline looks completely different from yours. Because recognition is timeless. Souls don't keep calendars, they keep memories of eternity. So if you find yourself drawn to someone whose years don't match yours, don't rush to analyze. Instead, listen. Listen for the resonance, feel for the peace. Ask not, does this make sense? But, does this make me more? Because that's what divine connection does. It stretches you, humbles you, matures you beyond your own understanding, and in that expansion, you begin to realize something sacred. Maturity was never about how many times the earth has circled the sun, but how many times your heart has opened and learned to love again. Real growth is not counted in birthdays, it's measured in awakenings. There's a subtle but profound difference between being drawn to someone and being called to them. One is emotional electricity, the rush of chemistry, the flutter that dances in your chest when you meet someone whose energy collides beautifully with yours. The other is deeper, still quiet, sacred. It doesn't shout, it hums. It doesn't ignite a spark, it builds a flame, and this is where discernment must rise above infatuation. Because not every spark is meant to burn forever. Some are just meant to light your way for a moment. We live in a time that glorifies instant feelings. The world tells you that love should be spontaneous, fiery, intoxicating, and unexplainable. But divine love, the kind that lasts, the kind that refines, moves differently. It's not a high, it's a harmony. It's not born out of impulse but out of insight. When your soul is attuned to the Spirit, you begin to sense the difference between emotional attraction and divine assignment. One pulls you toward pleasure. The other draws you toward purpose. Discernment is not suspicion, it's spiritual clarity. It's the quiet knowing that emerges when the noise of desire sills. It's that still, small voice inside you that says, be patient. Watch how they move when no one's watching. Because the truth is, anyone can impress you in a moment. But it takes time to reveal consistency. Infatuation is loud, it screams urgency. The Spirit whispers peace. When you're caught up in infatuation, you rush. When you're led by discernment, you rest. The heart is a powerful instrument, but it can play false notes when it's tuned by loneliness or fear. That's why discernment doesn't come from emotion alone. It comes from alignment. It comes from stillness, prayer, reflection, and wisdom. Sometimes what feels like love is really the echo of an unmet need, a wound calling out for attention. And until that wound is healed, you will keep mistaking resonance for revelation. So when someone enters your life, don't just ask, how do they make me feel? Ask, what part of me awakens in their presence? Does this connection bring peace or confusion? Growth or regression? Do you feel grounded or restless? The Spirit always leads you toward peace, even when the path challenges your comfort. Infatuation promises thrill but often leaves emptiness once the excitement fades. Discernment requires patience because time reveals what charm conceals. You must be willing to observe patterns, to watch how someone handles disappointment, conflict, and silence. A soul aligned with you will not just speak beautifully. They will live truthfully. You'll sense it in their energy, in the way they listen, in their ability to honor what's sacred to you. Discernment notices the small things, how they speak about others, how they handle responsibility, how they respond to correction. The spiritual journey of love is not about finding someone perfect. It's about recognizing the person whose imperfections are compatible with your growth. That recognition comes only when you are clear within yourself. The more you know who you are, the less likely you are to be seduced by who you imagine someone else to be. Infatuation thrives in projection. Discernment thrives in truth. Sometimes, discernment will lead you to step back from what feels right because it isn't time. Sometimes it will tell you to wait when everything in you wants to move forward. It's not punishment, it's protection. It's the universe saying, not yet. There's still something I'm shaping in you both. When you can trust that delay doesn't mean denial, you start to live from wisdom instead of impulse. True discernment is not cold or analytical. It's deeply compassionate. It sees the divine in the other person but also recognizes when your paths are not meant to merge. It can love without possession, bless without clinging, and release without resentment. That's the mark of maturity, understanding that not every connection must lead to covenant. When you master the art of discernment, you stop chasing what glitters and start recognizing what glows. You stop mistaking noise for music. And in that quiet, sacred clarity, love reveals itself not as a storm to survive but as a sanctuary to dwell in. Because in the end, it is better to be led by peace than driven by passion. There's a sacred mystery in the word covering. It's not about control, not about possession, but protection. In the spiritual sense, a covering is a space where something fragile can become strong, where what's just beginning can safely unfold. Think of it as a greenhouse for the soul. A seed doesn't thrive in open exposure. It grows under care, in an environment where it's nurtured, shielded, and allowed to develop before it's revealed. That's what divine relationships need, not secrecy but sacred protection. When Ruth met Boaz, there was something divine about their connection, but it didn't flourish in chaos or gossip. It was guarded, it grew in honor. Naomi acted as her covering, not controlling, not manipulating but guiding her through wisdom. There is a pattern in that story. Before love becomes covenant, it needs counsel. Before a bond becomes public, it must be protected in the quiet. That's where discernment and destiny begin to take shape. Beneath the canopy of spiritual order. In every meaningful connection, especially one that challenges the expectations of others, like a relationship with an age difference, or a pairing that defies social logic, you will need protection from outside noise. The world loves to comment on what it doesn't understand, and if you let too many voices speak over your life, you'll lose the sound of your own soul. A covering keeps you grounded when opinions rise like storms. It reminds you that not every voice deserves access to your peace. A covering doesn't just shield you from the world. It shields you from yourself. From impatience, from ego, from the temptation to rush what's meant to ripen. It creates structure for something sacred to grow naturally. Without it, even divine connections can be crushed under the pressure of exposure. Love is not meant to perform, it's meant to transform. But transformation takes time, and time needs safety too often. People confuse secrecy with sacredness. To hide something in shame is to starve it of light. But to keep something sacred is to give it the right kind of light. The kind that warms, not burns. That's the difference between fear and wisdom. A divine covering doesn't silence you, it secures you. It's not about who you're hiding from, but what you're protecting. When love is covered properly, by spiritual mentors, wise friends, or simply by prayer and reflection, it gains clarity. The emotions settle. The noise fades, and the connection reveals its true essence. Does it still feel peaceful after counsel? Does it still align after reflection? Does it grow stronger under accountability? If so, it's likely built on truth, not fantasy. But if it wilts under guidance, perhaps it was never meant to bear fruit in the first place. Every sacred union requires alignment with divine order. Not because love needs permission to exist, but because it needs grounding to endure. A relationship that resists covering is like a roofless house. It may look beautiful in fair weather, but it will not survive the rain. The rain will come. Doubts will come. Critics will come. And when they do, what holds you together will not be passion alone, but principle. Naomi didn't just tell Ruth what to do. She gave her a structure of wisdom to navigate something new. That's what a covering does. It doesn't live your story for you, but it helps you interpret it rightly. It ensures that passion doesn't outrun purpose, and that emotion doesn't eclipse direction. And when purpose and passion flow in harmony, love becomes an instrument in the divine symphony. Something that resonates beyond the two of you. You see, no great love story in history or scripture stood on emotion alone. They stood on honor, patience, and protection. When you honor the process, you invite grace into it. When you seek wise counsel, you invite order into it. And when you remain covered, you allow divine timing to do what haste never can. Perfect the outcome. So if what you found feels sacred, don't expose it too soon. Let it grow under the quiet shade of divine wisdom. Because love that is truly from God doesn't fear the covering. It flourishes under it. Uncovered love burns fast, covered love burns forever. Love without wisdom can quickly lose its way. When something sacred begins to unfold between two people, it must be handled not only with feeling but with understanding. The heart may know what it wants, but the spirit must know what it's doing. That's where boundaries and wisdom come in. Not as fences to limit love, but as frameworks to preserve its beauty. True love, divine love, is not chaos as order disguised as passion. It flourishes within structure, not outside it. You see, the moment two souls connect, they create a new space, a spiritual ecosystem. And that space has to be tended like a garden. If left untended, even the most promising garden is overtaken by weeds. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are edges that define what's sacred. They say, this is how we protect what we're building. Because without order, even divine intention can lose its shape. So many relationships falter not because the love wasn't real, but because it wasn't guarded with wisdom. There must be awareness of timing, integrity, and intention. Especially when there's an age difference, or when the connection challenges expectations. Wisdom becomes the anchor that keeps emotion from drifting into misunderstanding. Love must learn to breathe between patience and prudence. It's not about restraint, it's about rhythm. Wisdom in love asks questions. Are we honoring each other's seasons? Are we moving with clarity or just chemistry? Are we respecting each other's responsibilities, families, commitments, and futures? Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is not to say yes too soon, but to wait long enough for peace to confirm what passion has awakened. Love that's from the divine will never demand you compromise your integrity to sustain it. It will not rush you beyond what's ethical, nor lure you into secrecy that feeds shame. Practical wisdom might sound unromantic, but it's the foundation of trust. It looks like setting emotional and physical boundaries that preserve your sense of self. It looks like financial honesty, transparent communication, and clarity about what you both want and where you both stand. Love is not proven by how fast it moves, but by how well it endures. And endurance requires order. There's also the wisdom of pacing. A fire that burns too hot too soon consumes itself. But a steady flame, tended carefully, can outlast the night. So when love begins, resist the temptation to define it too quickly or display it too loudly. Let it grow in private maturity before it seeks public validation. Protect it not because you're ashamed, but because sacred things deserve quiet beginnings. And then there's spiritual wisdom, the kind that sees beyond the immediate. It understands that divine connections will often be tested by misunderstanding, distance, or doubt. You may not always be on the same page, but if you're in the same story, time will reveal alignment. Sometimes wisdom is knowing when to speak and when to listen. Sometimes it's knowing when to fight for the connection, and when to surrender it to divine timing. Love seasoned with wisdom doesn't panic when storms come. It doesn't crumble when questioned. It stands, rooted in honesty, grounded in mutual respect. It welcomes counsel, embraces growth, and refuses to manipulate outcomes. Wisdom brings humility, and humility keeps love pure. In every divine relationship, wisdom becomes the pulse that keeps passion alive and healthy. It ensures that love isn't just emotional, it's sustainable. It teaches you that saying, now, at the right moment can preserve a yes, that will last for a lifetime. It reminds you that not everything that feels right is right now. If love is truly from God, it will never lead you into confusion. It will move with clarity, order, and peace. Because love without wisdom burns out, but love guided by wisdom burns forever. Every divine connection will be tested. Not because it is real. Anything that carries light will inevitably attract shadows. Love, especially one born of purpose, will stir both admiration and resistance. It's not the easy kind of story where everything aligns without friction. It's the kind that requires strength, patience, and an understanding that every blessing draws attention. Not all of it kind. When two people come together under divine orchestration, the universe celebrates, but the world questions. People will talk. They'll analyze, whisper, and speculate. Especially when something doesn't fit the pattern, like an age difference, a cultural gap, or an unconventional bond. But remember this: people only question what they cannot comprehend. They measure by appearances what God measures by purpose. And if you are not careful, their noise can drown out the sacred rhythm of your own connection. There's a reason storms always circle around emerging light. The moment you begin to align with destiny, opposition awakens. Not to destroy you, but to define you. Resistance has a purpose. It teaches you to separate what's spoken to you from what's spoken over you. Not every opinion deserves your response. Not every battle deserves your energy. What's divine does not need defending, it only needs living. In moments of tension, when gossip rises or doubt creeps in, you'll be tempted to explain yourself to prove the validity of what you feel. But real love doesn't need applause. It needs authenticity. The moment you start living to justify your connection to others, you've already left the sacred space of peace. The truest power is silence. The quiet confidence of knowing that time will testify on your behalf. Every strong relationship will encounter warfare, not necessarily from people, but from unseen forces that test the foundation. Communication will be strained, misunderstandings will surface, and insecurities will whisper lies. These are not signs of failure. They are invitations to deepen trust. You don't grow by avoiding tension. You grow by learning to stand together through it. The storms that are meant to break you will, if you let them, reveal your roots instead. Prayer becomes your shelter here. Not just the kind where you ask for outcomes, but the kind that steadies your heart. When you pray together, you align not just with each other, but with the source of the love itself. You begin to see that the battle isn't against the world. It's against the urge to let fear interpret your story. You don't need to fight to be understood, you need to remain faithful to the truth you already know. And understand this: warfare always precedes revelation. The greater the resistance, the greater the significance of what's being birthed. That's why certain unions feel like they stir up storms. They are not casual encounters, they are catalytic ones. They are meant to shift something, to awaken something, to create ripples that extend far beyond the two of you. When others speak against what they cannot discern, don't curse them. Bless them. Their misunderstanding does not define your truth. Let your peace be your protest. Let your fruit speak louder than your defense. Time is the great revealer. It separates illusion from intention. And if the love you share is truly from the divine, it will withstand not just distance and difference but doubt and delay. Even Ruth and Boaz faced public scrutiny. Their bond was not typical. Yet it was fruitful. It was heaven's defiance against human logic. Every divinely orchestrated connection will, at some point, have to walk through the wilderness of misunderstanding. But that wilderness is holy ground. It's where purpose matures, where love becomes conviction rather than convenience. So when the voices rise, when circumstances tighten, and when fear tempts you to retreat, remember, this is not punishment, it's purification. What can withstand the storm proves its authenticity. Love that survives resistance doesn't just endure, it evolves. Because in the end, true love doesn't crumble under pressure, it clarifies under fire. There comes a moment in every spiritual journey when feeling must give way to knowing, when emotion quiets and what remains is a still awareness, a sense that something larger than your own understanding is at work. That's what happens when divine love begins to reveal itself. It isn't rushed, it doesn't shout. It unfolds through confirmation, one layer at a time. Like the dawn slowly convincing the horizon to open its eyes. You can't always explain why you're drawn to someone. You can't chart it on a graph or justify it with logic. But when something is divinely aligned, it carries a rhythm that can't be denied. There's peace where there should be confusion, and clarity where there should be chaos. It's not the kind of peace that comes from everything making sense. It's the kind that whispers, "You are exactly where you're meant to be." That's how divine confirmation feels, not an argument in your head, but a resonance in your soul. We spend so much time trying to predict or control the future, as if we could force the divine to fit our timeline. But purpose doesn't bow to impatience. It reveals itself in seasons. Confirmation often comes quietly, in repeated patterns, in synchronicities too precise to be random. You'll notice that every time you try to walk away, something brings you back, not out of obsession, but because something deeper hasn't finished speaking. The same signs appear, the same lessons resurface. The same peace returns when you surrender instead of resist, and sometimes, that confirmation won't come from fireworks or visions. It will come from alignment. Doors open without manipulation. Obstacles dissolve without struggle. People who are meant to walk with you will keep showing up, even after silence, distance, or doubt. The divine has a way of rearranging circumstances to make truth unmistakable. But you have to be listening. You have to be patient enough to let the revelation ripen. If you force what's not yet ready, you may damage what's meant to bless you. The universe, or God, however you name the sacred, operates in precise timing. You can't harvest fruit in spring and expect it to taste like summer. Likewise, you can't rush love that's still being shaped. Some connections require pruning before they can bloom. Some relationships demand solitude before union. Sometimes, confirmation looks like delay because the divine is still working on both hearts separately before bringing them together in full. Prayer and reflection become the compass here. Not the kind of prayer that begs, but the kind that listens. Sit in silence, breathe, and ask, does this connection draw me closer to peace or further from it? Does it expand me or shrink me? The answers won't shout back. They'll emerge gently. And when they do, they'll feel like truth, simple, clear, and grounded. That's how you know it's real. It's also important to invite wisdom into this discernment. Seek the counsel of people who aren't moved by emotion but by spiritual clarity. Let those who have walked through their own seasons of love and loss speak into your process. Not to dictate your choice, but to help you see what you can't see yet. The divine often confirms through people, through circumstance, through an inner knowing that remains even when everything else shifts. And here's the beautiful part: when something is truly meant for you, you won't have to chase it, it will return, reaffirm, and realign without force. Divine timing doesn't need panic, it needs patience. You will know it's from God because it will bring order, not chaos. It will grow, not build you, not break you. In the end, confirmation is not a sign from the sky, it's the quiet unfolding of truth within you. You don't find it by demanding answers, but by resting in awareness until the pieces click into place. You'll recognize it because your soul will stop searching, because what is meant for you won't confuse you, won't rush you, and won't leave you wondering. It will simply be.